Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ella Massell, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back. Now, parents and teachers are two very prominent mentors in a child's life, creating the environment to learn and grow, and having a positive relationship between both will help in that stability. Our guest today is a Fulbright specialist in the U.S. Department of State, as well as becoming an author and a speaker. With her background in both research and practice in education, she has a lot of experience in dealing with today's topic and how impactful it can be to students. Dr. Jenny Rankin, thank you so much for joining me, Jenny.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, working as a Fulbright specialist, what is the main aim that role plays in education?
It pairs you with universities, and most people know about Fulbright scholars, which are university students paired to learn at other universities around the world. But a Fulbright specialist is someone who already has her doctorate and is paired with a university to go over and help by offering lectures, professional development, sometimes putting together like a seminar, that sort of thing.
Well, that's such an incredible, impactful role, and especially sort of introducing a whole lot of different ideas to many people who have never really heard of a lot of the roles that education sort of takes place. Now, how did you get to be a part of that curriculum creation?
Well, I came up through education. I was a teacher and then a teacher on special assignment, which is an administrative role here in the US, and then an assistant principal, where I was doing a lot of behavior issues with students, but also leading different curricular charges. And then I became a school district administrator where I oversaw data and assessment for a large school district here in Southern California. And then I left that role to co-found an education data systems company. And I was chief educational research officer there for quite some time. And we sold that company. And by then I had gotten my first doctorate, which is a Ph.D. in education. And I was very passionate about getting my findings out into the world. So I didn't just publish my dissertation. I started publishing books about different content for mainly educators, but also researchers and somewhat parents as well. I have 14 books so far, and I'm also a writer. I have an online column for Psychology Today that's education focused, but so much of that is parenting. But then on the side, I do all of this speaking, going out to universities and teaching a class here and there. Like before COVID, I was at University of Cambridge. I taught there. And then post-COVID, I taught at Columbia University. So teaching just, working with universities here and there and speaking at research conferences. So I really do a wide range of different things. And each one together really fills up my day. But it's also very exciting because it allows me to interact with a lot of different educators and parents. And I have some volunteer roles where I work with parents, and it makes for a very busy yet exciting and rewarding life.
No, it really does sound like it. This sounds like there's so many ideas that can sort of come around, not just from you yourself, but also from other parents, other educators as well, that sort of build up and become one big idea and evolve into so much more.
That's true.
Now, what do you think is the most common frustration parents or teachers sort of express when having that communication or not having that communication with each other?
Oh, I love that you use the word communication when you're talking about the frustration, because I really think that communication is the biggest frustration between each party. And I believe that a huge part of it is that we're so busy, whether we're parents or educators. I'm both, so, so I know both sides of it. We're so busy, and each side kind of forgets how busy the other side is, and each side tends to just be communicating in the fastest, easiest way for him or her, and not always thinking of the full set of problems that the other party is dealing with. And so you start to hear comments on both sides that they just don't get it. They just don't get that. They just don't get, they don't know that I'm dealing with this, or why haven't they logged on? There's this disconnect of feeling that the other party has a lack of empathy for the other side, when really both sides are just very, very busy and need to come up with ways to communicate that serve both sides, because both sides are, passionate about the same thing, helping the child. And when they can work together and they do make things easier on each other, they're better able to support those kids.
No, it sounds like it's a double-edged sword when it comes to it. It's like you communicate, but you don't communicate in the way that the other person really has time to sit there and listen, and don't really have the time, because I think you forget a lot of teachers, they're dealing with 20 other kids and probably 60, 50 other parents as well, sort of communicating in completely different ways.
Yeah.
But then you forget with parents, they have 3 or 4 other kids.
Yes.
They also have work, some of them, and sort of balancing the communication struggles that everyone sort of has in the different ways people communicate.
Yeah. And that's why the leadership at the top in school districts, it's so important that they come up with systems where all of the teachers will be using, they can use all different technologies for the different things that suit their subject or their grade level. But when it comes to communication, such as a parent portal or class websites, whatever it is, if from the top they establish that there needs to be consistency from one class to the next and from one grade to the next, all the tools are very similar, for communication, all the tech tools. And if the teachers get over that hump of learning whatever tool that's going to be for a school district, then there's that continuity, and you don't get a teacher feeling frustrated. Why is this parent always calling me asking what the assignments are? It's right here on my class website, when her class website is some homegrown thing that only she does, that the other teachers aren't doing from other grades, because that parent might have 3 kids in different grade levels that, they're all, or a child at a school where there are multiple classes. And there's a good chance that parent has all of those scenarios. And so when there's so many different things going on, it seems very straightforward from the teachers, where the teacher's sitting. Hey, I told the parents up front, this is where I post my assignments. This is the way I do it. But when it's inconsistent with what other educators are doing, it actually makes it harder on the teacher as well, because the parents aren't as supportive because they can't be with that much going on.
Yeah, no, it fills up so much of your time to just even listening to the list of things that both
Yes.
have to deal with. There's a lot there's a lot that's going on. And like you said, balancing so many different children is such a big thing. Now, thank you so much for that introduction. Before we get deeper into it, I'd love to get to know some of your interests and recommendations. And hopefully we warm up a little bit with some fun questions before we get into the deeper stuff. So to start off with, do you have a favorite book that you could recommend?
Yes, and it reveals how nerdy I am, because it's not a thriller or a romance or anything. This is my favorite book. mistakes were made, but not by me. And it's all about cognitive dissonance and how we all like to think of ourselves as good and moral and also correct and smart. And so anytime there's information that is at odds with that impression we have of ourselves, like if, say, a different political party offers some input that doesn't come from our side, that might make us feel silly, or, we really thought this was what was going on with our kid. But now, people are starting to say that maybe this is happening instead. We tend to undervalue that information or reject it altogether. And this book's so good, not just as I think the best book out there on cognitive dissonance, but it also shares a wealth of research in a really engaging way. So it doesn't feel like this big information dump. It's fun. When they talk about different studies, it's more like storytelling. So I just really love this book.
No, that sounds like a really good book, especially like you're right with the concept. We so much focus on how we view ourselves when someone else sort of says differently, or someone else says that this area needs to be better. There's a whole lot that we're like, oh, okay, no, that's fine. We're fine as we are. So there's that mentality that I think that book really dives into and really speaks to a lot of us, I hope, is sort of wanting to acknowledge the fact that that's the situation.
Yeah, and yes, and it is. It's hard to teach because people tend to think that other people are doing that, but that we're not. Part of that. That we wanted to have that good positive self-image, but it's highly relevant to the topic that we're talking about today because you get a parent and an educator in a room together, and each already has a pre-existing notion of what's going on, and each is trying really hard, and wants to be acknowledged for that and respected for that. But it can cause a lot of problems when we're not aware of these things going on in our brains.
Exactly. Well, mistakes were made. Go and check that book out. I'm definitely going to look that up after, because I'm a little bit nerdy like that as well. I love books that sort of deal deep in with things that I don't really understand. I have just sort of realized about myself. And that's something that I am going to acknowledge that I go through on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. And all of us do. So at least you acknowledge it. You're a step ahead.
I'm one step closer. Exactly.
Yes, you're ahead of the bunch.
So when it comes to movies, do you have a movie that you have recently enjoyed?
Yes. Just recently, I saw that movie Naiad. Have you heard of it, with Annette Bening and Jodie Foster?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's so good. And it's about the woman who swam from Cuba to Florida, and it's her journey, and it's just really inspiring. I thought it was more something that my boyfriend would enjoy. So I was just working while I was and I very quickly closed the laptop and really got into it. And there's even a line from a poem in that movie that I've since posted huge on my living room wall. I was so inspired by it. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. I love movies that really look into a person and look into an actual person and what they've sort of gone through and their struggles. I just had a show recently who were talking about The Color Purple as well, being another film that they recently got into. And I love those films. So Naiad is definitely something I'm surprised I have not heard of it. And I'm making it a note now, because I think that's such an empowering movie as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you'll love it. It's so good.
So when it comes to podcast, do you have a podcast that you could recommend to us?
I am a huge podcast fan. And I think too, because being a working mom and being so busy all the time, I run. And what I do is I listen to podcasts or audiobooks when I run. So I'm absolutely obsessed. There are too many to list, but I think some of my favorite, I tend to listen to two types. One are psychology podcasts, like the Hidden Brain, or You Are Not So Smart is a really good one. And I also like history podcasts, like Stuff You Missed in History. class, or there's a great science history podcast called The Disappearing Spoon that I am obsessed with. So yeah, I love podcasts.
No, that's amazing. I'm like you. I listen to it when I'm only going for a walk or when I'm going for a run because it's so much better than listening to music. You're actually like actively listening to something and learning something. And yeah, so those podcasts that you just listed are definitely something I'm going to look up because this is why I love this show. I love the amount of podcasts I get recommended because now my list is like constantly growing. There's always new episodes that I have to listen to that fill my space. So this is definitely going to add into what I'm going to try out. So when it comes to role models now, do you have someone that you look up to either in your professional or personal life?
My greatest role model, he passed away years ago, but my father was definitely my biggest role model. I followed him around everywhere, and he was such an inspiration. He was very strong, but very kind. He managed to be that combo, that unique combo of strength and kindness. And he was so inspiring. And once I was trying to describe to somebody what I thought the biggest part of his impact on me was, and I think it was that he always acted like whatever dream I had, whatever notion, even if I was 5 years old and I wanted, to be something crazy, he always interacted with me about it that was totally possible. Like, okay, you're going to do this. Okay, well, then what are we going to do next? What should we use? He really, like, when I look at jumps I've made in my life or my career where I've shot really high for something that someone else would think, oh, you're going to go for that? You want to teach Ivy League? Like, you're not going to get to do that. It's all possible because of him. I just, I guess I'm ignorant in that way. Sure, it's all possible, and then all these great things happen because you have that open mindset.
Oh, that's amazing. I love people like that, like looking up to people like that who have just such oh, you can do it. Like, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you stopping? Why are you stopping until you get there? If that's something you want to do, then go ahead and do it. Rather than people who are just like a bit more realistic. I love the optimism that some people have when it comes to role models as well. So he definitely sounds like such an inspirational person.
Yeah, he was, and he really set for me what it means to be a teacher, because then I carried that into my teaching, that if we approach our students like that and we approach our children like that, then the sky's the limit. There's no ceiling above them.
Yeah, there's no reality. Reality doesn't exist. There's a utopia and that's it.
Yeah.
So I know that everybody has a very different definition as to what parenting is. And everyone has a very different understanding as to what being a parent entails. To you, either in professionally or even personally as well, do you have a definition to what parenting is to you?
I do. I'm a very loving, warm and fuzzy person. So it's kind of a surprising answer for me because it sounds a little cold. But for me, I strongly believe that our job as parents is to prepare our kids to be without us, to be successful adults and to fly the nest and to have their impact on the world on their own without us, so that they're with us for such a small portion of their lives. And then we're not always going to be there either. One day we're going to be gone. And so I think there really needs to be a focus in parenting on, of course, with love, but helping our kids make their own decisions. And that doesn't just mean a free for all, come back after midnight, that sort of thing. But really talking to them, as they encounter different situations, instead of dictating to them how they will behave in that situation, asking them questions about, well, what are you going to do? And what do you think? And so that they're constantly practicing how to make their own decisions so that when the training wheels of the parents come off of them, in gradual stages, they're at that party and they make that good decision, not to do certain dangerous things or, whatever it is. And then when they're, picking their career and they're really thinking about things like how they're going to have a positive impact on this planet, on other people, and to really better society. And so I really think we have to be constantly thinking, how is this kid going to be without me? What can I do so that he or she makes those positive decisions alone?
That's such a great answer, because I think like when you're talking about being a mentor for a child, like I've had a lot of guests come onto the show and say that, but you're never really talking about the fact that you have to prepare for what's after you, what's after living with a parent, what's after going to college, and what do you do when you're an adult? In this situation, what would you do? And it's not like what would your mom do, or what would your dad do, but what would you want to do? If you're drinking, for example, and you're at a party, what do you do after? Oh, there's like difficult situations. So I love that answer, and I think it's such an important way to distinct raising them, and also raising them to be a part of society that's going to be healthy and happy and just a lot more intuitive to how your actions affect other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And it's so much more empowering for the child, that autonomy and the respect that we're asking them. Well, what do you think? That they actually have a voice in their own lives is very empowering as well.
So, in saying that, what do you think that expectant parents sort of need to be aware of in their transition to parenthood?
Oh, that's a good question. I think not to take so much responsibility that they're controlling everything. Nope, you will have your piano lessons and you will do this. If I think they have to be ready for their child to be a participant in their own upbringing, and just to know that sometimes more isn't better. There just another study just came out just recently about how many parents are overscheduling their kids. And we know like Dr. Denise Pope out of Stanford has a lot of research on, educators giving too much homework. Sometimes we're just doing too much, and we need to step back and listen more to what are our students' interests? What are they, struggling with? Because a child who's passionate about something is going to learn so much more about it than if we're forcing our own interests on our child. There'll be a student who's maybe not even doing well in school, but comes home and has memorized all the baseball stats, or how, is putting together a model drone, or, I don't know, whatever it is. So I think we just need to be ready to listen more and not think it's all on our shoulders to decide the path that our child takes.
And I think you mentioned a really good point as well when it comes to homework and education, and a lot of educators and parents. And I mean, this topic today is going to be a really big topic as to how both parents and teachers can sort of mentor a child, because they are the two biggest impacts in a child's life, and they have such a huge involvement in what that child is capable of or believes that they're capable of. So when it comes to that importance, can you provide us a little bit of an overview of the importance of effective parent and teacher communication, and how that would look like in a professional sense?
One, I think there have to be clear tools established. How are these two? What's it? Anytime a parent has a question, or a teacher needs to reach out to a parent about maybe it's a behavior issue or an academic issue, what are those lines of communication, and keeping those just well established, so people know where to go. But also some flexibility. Back when I was based at school sites, I was in what you might call a rougher area. And we had a lot of parents that they were struggling so hard, to put food on the table. They had multiple jobs. There was so much going on. And I think even if we have an established way to communicate, which is helpful, it's setting expectations. There also always has to be that grace and that flexibility to know we don't know what somebody's going through, and how can we make it easier on him or her, because that makes it easier for the other person to support the child as well. So I think that's really important, to constantly be aware of the other side. I look back, I didn't have my daughter till I was almost 38. So I was an educator for a very long time before I became a parent. And I look back on those early years, and I was doing the right things in terms of, I was making sure that my communications home were translated into the home language, because the home language wasn't usually English. And I was doing all the things on the sort of what to do checklist. But I really didn't have that understanding of how busy you are if you're a parent. And I only have one kid. I can't imagine. I don't know if parents do it, that have 3 or 4. I just have one, and I'm a working mom, and I'm so busy, So I don't know how I would have maybe gotten that, but I wish I did. I wish I got that sooner. I would spend a lot of time in my students' homes. I would go for dinners or their quinceañeras and, their family celebrations. So I did spend a lot of time with them, but I just didn't quite get it. So I don't know if that's in a teacher preparation program. We need to get a little more of that, particularly with our younger teachers, to know if they don't have kids yet, they might need some more feedback from their colleagues who do have kids about how busy those parents are, and how we really need to simplify communications we're sending home, and other things they're just sensitive to that fact.
I guess when it comes to also the teacher's expectations of parent participation, there's a lot that sort of needs to be understood. I know one of my friends, she's a preschool teacher. She's like grade prep teacher. And she sends she used to send her first year a fortnightly newsletter as an email, sort of like what's going on in the next month, what's going on the next week, what to expect. And she did that for the first year because that's what her degree was like. This is a really good idea to do. This is something that you can do to sort of manage a lot of your parent communication. But she realized that barely half of the parents actually had time to sit down and read it, because it was pages long. It was like a booklet kind of thing and she was like, okay, well, I had the time to write all this, but the parents can't read it. And she learned in her first year at the fact that, yes, okay, it's a practical way, but it's also such a time-consuming thing for a lot of parents who are managing multiple kids, who are also managing like a 5 or 6-year-old who is constantly running around, constantly needing to do activities, needing to fill up their time with other extracurricular stuff that they do as well. So there's a whole lot of things. And the next year, she just made like one page of what's coming up, because she learned so much as to how much it actually impacts parents who do want to participate but don't have time to.
Yeah. I love that you shared that example. It's a perfect illustration. But particularly for those younger, newer teachers that, care so much and want to make a difference, but are out of touch with parents' time constraints. So I love that. Same thing at, that back to school night that starts at the, start of the school year, when parents come in, if instead of just slides of bullets on all the things the teacher's doing, they can always point them to like, hey, if you're interested in my grading policy, you can go here. These things exist if you have questions about these. But really, this is the main thing I want. I would love for you to do at home. For example, we do this with the kids every day. So whenever the kid comes home, if you want to be in touch with what they're doing in my, say, science class, you can ask them, what was the, how did you, tell me what you did with, this activity. And we just hit them with that biggest bang for their buck kind of thing, so that it's not so hard to remember or to even understand.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions surrounding a lot of the dynamics between a parent and teacher. So, can you list some of the myths that a lot of parents or even teachers sort of face when dealing with that relationship?
Oh, sure. Myths that parents think about the teachers, or myths that teachers think about the parents?
It could be either one. It could be, sometimes there's both.
Yes. Yes. Well, gosh, yeah, on both sides. I think, there is a myth that goes around that teachers are in education because they want summers off. When in reality, two of my books are about teacher burnout. It's on par with things like the military. To be a teacher, it's like being a soldier on the front lines. It's such a hard job. And they found, I think it's 96%. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did a big survey. 96% said that they went into teaching because they care about students and they want to have a positive impact on youth. And they don't tend to get paid, what they're worth or what their level of education would warrant. And it's a very, very altruistic calling. And so when that myth goes around that, they just want summers off. Well, summers, they're trying to recover. They're doing all their lesson plans for the next year, and they're prepping. And, you see emails on the weekends and postings on the weekends, because when we're teachers, we just never stop. It's a very, very difficult job. And so I wish that myth were replaced with more awareness on the other side. And then the flip side of that, I would say a myth that sometimes teachers start to feel if they're not hearing from a parent, or they're not seeing as many parents participate on campus or whatever it is, just that it's not that the parents don't care. Every parent cares about his or her child. That's a given. It's just another reason they're busy, or maybe they feel intimidated coming on campus. Maybe they didn't have a very good educational experience when they were young. And so it's a daunting notion to walk onto campus. And so there are many other reasons going on. So I think it's just that if both sides give each other more grace, those myths would dissolve.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I sort of got, I think a lot of my parents, they always said about other parents being like, sometimes it feels like parents are using school as like a little babysitter for 8 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week. And like for that, it really does feel like it at times. I think especially when kids go to school and the parents sort of don't participate. And I know a few friends who sort of feel the same way, who are teachers or have done sort of a placement in education. And it really does have that impact of like the parents not caring. I mean, especially if you say that they do care and but they don't show that they care, which I think it still is an important aspect to it as well.
Yeah, it's funny that it hits on that whole cognitive dissonance that we were talking about earlier. If a child's doing well, the parent and teacher will think, "Oh, I've done such a good job. Look at what I'm doing." And then if the teacher or if the child's struggling, why can't that other person, like the teacher might think, why can't that parent do a better job raising this kid? Or the parent might think, why can't that teacher, teach in a way that will engage my child? There's this stepping away if we see like misbehavior or lack of academic interest, whatever it is with the child. And yes, I think that we have to always remember both sides care. What else might be going on? Because that way we can investigate. Is that parent not involved because I'm sending all these emails home and it's just so overwhelming? Is it because of a job? And same thing with the with the teacher? Is my child not connecting with those lessons because he or she's talking in class? Do I need to talk about school in a more respectful way? I definitely saw, not only as a teacher back when I was a school, teacher of kids, but also as a parent in interacting with other parents, I've seen the same thing where one of the biggest mistakes a parent can make is to think that by standing behind everything their child does, like my child couldn't have been wrong. Oh, that mean teacher, or that sort of thing, or in those peer relations, my child couldn't have done something wrong. It must be the other kid. Anytime we are just absolutely on our child's side, no matter what, and we don't work with our kid asking, well, why did that happen? Well, what could you have done differently? And even if a child doesn't get along with a teacher, we could say, well, someday you'll have a boss that you don't get along with, or you'll have a difficult coworker. So let's talk about some things you might try, to get along well with that person. And, we put that onus on the child. Again, we're raising that kid to function without us. We're not always going to be there to say, my kid was right. We need to teach the kid to improve whatever the situation is. And so I think that's really important, is to not just absolutely stand behind the kid, but to really assume that the other side might have some very good points and investigate what's really going on so that we can better help our kids navigate it.
No, that's very true. And I think you were mentioning a little bit earlier about the different backgrounds that sort of take place in a lot of schools. So how can teachers really promote a sense of inclusivity and belonging amongst a lot of the parents, especially if it comes from a diverse background or even language barriers that take a huge precedence?
I think very similar to when I was talking about advice for new parents about not assuming you have all the answers and you're going to dictate what happens. I think the same thing in schools' relationships with communities. We need to be ready as educators to loosen the reins and let the community, the parents, run with ideas. For example, most at depending on the age level, but about 75%, 85% of teachers are white females, and that's not proportional to what the kids are or what the community is. We're just one demographic, and it's important to remember that other people are coming from different backgrounds and they're going to have different ideas, and their ideas might be better than ours, and their ideas might be something we haven't thought of before. If we have in our mind, oh, we're going to have this school carnival, and that carnival looks very much like it did, 50 years ago, back in our childhood. Maybe the community has a different idea. Maybe there are different foods they like, different music they like, different, and we have to be ready to loosen those reins. And that's why those parent-teacher associations like the PTA, we have here in the U.S. and different countries have different labels for them, but different opportunities for parents to participate. Sometimes we can get frustrated as educators thinking, oh, we don't have any parents signing up. We don't have enough parent volunteers. But the more we make those organizations something where they're calling the shots and they're bringing their ideas, and it's more rewarding for them, and then it tends to attract more parental involvement, and then we end up with events and activities, awards, excursions, whatever it is. We end up with these experiences that are better tied to what our students and their families might find valuable.
No, I think it's a really big thing because I grew up in a school, and I went to a school that had so many different backgrounds and so many different types of involvement, and language barriers is a huge thing because it was also full of so many diverse backgrounds. But one of the things that we all really enjoyed was the end of the year festival or the mid of the year festival, and we always had performances of different cultures take part in it. We had classes. We had like, there was one year, I think, especially when the parents got involved, of like they would have a little bit of time in the middle of the carnival where you could actually learn a dance from another culture. And we learned that. And I think I remember learning, I think it was some sort of Indian dance. And it was so nice to be able to take part in it and to really just enjoy something that I've never seen. And outside of my everyday, I wouldn't have seen it in any other situation. So to be able to take part in that and feel the different cultures that are involved in the school was such an eye-opening thing in terms of the respect that was gained, the humility as well, because I could not do it right the first time. So there was that whole lot of things. And it was so nice to be able to say, okay, I did this, and actually engage with so many different people who were trying it out as well. It was so much fun to be able to do.
And I love that it was dance as well. There's a lot of the cognitive sciences show us that when you're doing something in unison with other people, and you're physically doing it, that fosters stronger relationships and a whole host of other things. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's such a great experience to be able to also share, because I'm also part Malay. So we also had our dance that was there as well, which was so much fun. Even though I couldn't do it very well, there was still like everyone messing up was kind of like the best part about it, is because we were all learning it. We were all trying to understand it. And yeah, it was probably one of the best moments because we all got to take part in it. The whole school got to be involved.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's fantastic. I wish more schools would do that. That's such a great idea.
Yeah, no. I really like the idea of having that involvement. I think it's such an important part of a school. And I know we've said numerous times that parents are really busy and parents are sort of building up, but there's that huge community that sort of can involved in it as well. I was really glad that it was a community-based school, so everyone in the community, not just people who went to the school, but outside of it as well, were also taking part in creating and having a say in the school and having a say as to how it can affect a lot of people, because it was also very, very centered in the middle of a town, which was very important.
Wow. That's great.
So one of the things I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, was having that online communication between parents and teachers. So in what ways can technology and also other platforms effectively utilized to enhance that kind of communication that you would sort of expect both parent and teacher to take part in?
Well, a big part, whenever tech tools are selected, something huge that I've seen it handled really well, and I've seen it handled really poorly. And it's no surprise the difference in usage and communication that results from either scenario. There needs to be a lot of support in how to use the tool up front. Many school districts have a wealth of tools. It's great. You've got this special portal you can go into with these different languages or these supplemental exercises. And it's very overwhelming, not just for busy educators, but for busy or busy parents. It's so overwhelming. And so when you have so many tools and so much going on, it's too much, really. Not only should it be scaled back to basics, but at least your basic selection of tools, how you're going to use those, should be communicated in the clearest ways. For example, my daughter, the parent portal we were using when she first jumped to junior high, maybe a month in, we got something on how to use it. And I'm very techy. And even I was, getting an abbreviation from the math teacher. I didn't know where that was. It's really sad, because then you lose the parents. They're like, you know what, this is frustrating. And then that's their association with it. And then they're gone. They're not going to take advantage of that. It's too much. It's a mess, really. So it has to be so clear. Here are, the 4 steps, with images on how to see how your kid's doing. And it can be very timely, like, hey, it's the first week of school. Did you know that, progress is already posted in classes? Just click here. I've been surprised too to see in emails things that say that the students' grades they're live now. You can see them. Just go to our blah, blah, blah portal. And it's not even a link in the email. So then you're having to find, and I happen to be, as an educator, I'm very interested in my child's education, but other parents they don't even know what the word is. What is this? I happen to know what the tool is, but they don't necessarily. And those kinds of things, I wrote a whole post on it, and psychologist did today, yes, about how frustrating that is for parents and how important it is that you're constantly giving them that support. Here are those steps. Anytime you tell parents that something's live or they can look at something, we'll have a quick reference sheet, have something that will hold their hand through that process. And if you have any remaining questions, you can click here, and it's the email and the phone number and, of the district tech go-to or whatever it is. There just needs to be more support. And it's the same thing too for educators. New tools get rolled out all the time. Maybe a school district got some new funds and, other schools are using this tool, so we're going to use it now too. And the things that are thrown at busy teachers, I'm sure there might be a huge manual on how to use that tool, but can't you send the teacher, here are the 3 things to do to open up your class. Here are, just keep it very simple and straightforward. And so it's that usage communication, and don't assume that just because you sent it to parents once that you did the trick. Always have it right there. Always have, a link where they can click and get to that reference sheet that's just 1 page and says exactly what to do. Just stuff like that. I'm quite shocked when I see, and I think it's a lack of empathy for the other side. What people are going through, and whoever is blasting out that stuff to parents, it's usually that one person. And if that one person took the time to make something more user friendly, it would help thousands of parents who are then getting those emails or getting, those alerts.
Yeah, even just having it as a signature down below with links to like grades, the different links, that you can sort of just send. You don't even have to copy paste it anywhere. It's just email signature. That's it. It's right there. Like,
I love that.
There's so many different ways to communicate. And especially now, I think parents have a lot more of a active participation and the ability to actively participate because they can see their kids' grades almost immediately. They can see the progress. They can see any announcements that are coming up from teachers as well. And so when it comes to that site, especially from a teacher's perspective, what are the main things that should be on the site for easy access for every parent to sort of access it?
Every parent should have a very easy and clear way to communicate with the teacher. That should be just really clear. You could click and that's where you post it. Because we have things, Parent Square, Canvas, we have so many different things and you could conceivably communicate through any of them. So it's important for parents to know what the designated way is that's going to be consistent and they can get in the rhythm and get used to using it. Another thing, a parent should always be able to see how a child is doing academic. And that, we do have sometimes there's, like my daughter will tell me, like she had I won't say what year, but one year she had a science teacher who would just leave the assignments up with zero. But when they were due, they would become live that it was a 0, but it was just because the teacher hadn't graded them and he would take a month to grade, So I look at my chef and says, oh, okay, A, what's this F? What's going on here? And I think that needs to be, used in a very uniform way so that parents can rely on it. And that way, too, teachers aren't getting inundated with calls. What's going on with my kid? It makes it easier on the teacher, too. So a really clear way to know how the kid's doing academically. Another would be a clear way to know how the child is doing from a social emotional learning standpoint or behavior standpoint. Maybe like in elementary school, lots of times all the teachers will use something like Class Dojo where you can see behavior, or they'll use a tool like Kelvin where their school districts are collecting social emotional answers from students, so you can see how kids are doing that way. But some sort of feedback in that sense. And then fourth, what resources are available? If a child is struggling, what can I do about it? A real mistake a school sometimes make is, here's the grade, here's how your kid's doing, and then the parent is not armed in any way to do something about it, and lots of times children who are struggling the most in either domain, either academic or social emotional, so often it's because at home that parent's already, maybe struggling with those areas as well, and really needs that support. So, is there free after school tutoring? Is there, what is it? It should be very accessible and easy for the parent to see what he or she can do, or where she can send the child, but then to be easy to get the kid enrolled in that. Oh, yep, I do want my child doing that, having that after school support. Oh, click here, done. Just taking away those barriers to getting the kid supported.
I think the absolute worst sort of setup is the amount of tabs that every child. I'm like going to uni and I'm signing up to like classes, seeing announcements. The amount of tabs that I have to go through in order to find the latest announcement, the latest update, the latest thing that I need to know is too much for me to even go through. Imagine having 3 kids and having to deal with 3 different ways. Like, it's impossible. And it's so easy. I guess it's also so easy for a lot of the teachers to also get overwhelmed by how many students they have to keep updated. When you're talking about the behavioral assessment as well, I didn't even know that that was a thing, because I graduated high school before like the online communication was a big thing, before parents had that ability to do that. And finding out that that's now a common thing. Imagine looking at every kid every week and sort of keeping an eye on their behavior, not just their academics, but also, are they okay? Are they feeling okay? Are they looking like they're going through a lot of things at home? And actually having to write those down every week seems like such a task, to have 20 to 30 kids in one classroom. So like I feel like there's a lot of high expectations for both parents and teachers, but the reality is it can't be done as often as you would think. And you can totally understand why parental burnout and teacher burnout come so often when it comes to high school. And, looking at it now, I totally see why a lot of parents sort of leave their children at school and just let them be, because it's so overwhelming to be able to take part in. And even during lockdown as well, that must have been like the hardest time to constantly be overloaded with your kids 7 days a week for Melbourne, it's for about 2 years we had to be in lockdown. So there's just a whole lot of things. Like, it's making me realize a lot how that communication and also the boundaries and expectations are so important to have between a parent and a teacher.
Yeah. And that I love that you mentioned lockdown, because it's funny, that did give parents a chance to step into the shoes of a teacher and then see that juggle and think, well, I just have, sure, I was juggling working and I had my daughter at home, but, what if I was juggling a classroom of 35, 40 students, and then that was just one class of many, Back when I was a junior high school teacher, we had over 200 students, each, because we
Wow.
had the multiple class periods, and it did, I think, produce a nice empathy for, wow, that is a tough job.
No, it's I feel like those four categories that you mentioned a little bit earlier is certainly enough for every parent to manage, at least to keep an eye on the child. And one of the things that I absolutely hated, even just using it as a student, is the forum part of the communication. If teachers and parents were to communicate on a forum, for example, to find the latest forum update or the latest conversation would be the amount of times they'd have to scroll through in order
Oh,
to find
yeah.
it is too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, it's too much when something goes wrong with our phone, and I'm searching forums. Why is this happening? And things are old and things are, you're right. It's too much to navigate.
So when it comes to playing an active role as a parent, how can parents actively participate in the child's education, but also ensuring that they have both enough of a mentorship at home and in the classroom?
Oh, you mean to what degree should they be involved?
I think more along the lines of how do you sort of actively participate, but also in areas that where it's sort of the teacher's domain? Like, how do you sort of take part in that and also allowing someone else to educate your child?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I think going back to that notion of we don't have to control everything, so stepping back and as we raise our kids to be their own advocates and to be making their own quality decisions, leaning back and regularly asking the kid, well, what does your teacher say? Well, where did your teacher say to go? That sort of thing. Because then the kid becomes the empowered one to navigate whatever the teacher has set up and to know what to do, and can ask the parent for advice like, well, I emailed my teacher, I haven't, but I never heard back, what should I do? And then you can give that proddy, well, maybe send another email polite, and say, or maybe talk to your teacher in class and say, pardon me, not when he or she's talking to someone else, wait a moment, just to guide our child to be the his or her own advocate through that. And if we take that stance that we're helping our kid navigate all of it, I think we'll have less of like stepping on toes where it's maybe the teacher's domain to be judging a certain thing. Like let's say, just as an example, let's say the child is going to give a speech in a class. Instead of, I gave, the parents saying, I give speeches. I know how, here, look, there, I have this list I use. And then the kid's thinking, well, I have this rubric from the teacher and I really should be doing this, and then the parent just kind of takes up. It's constantly going back to, well, what is the teacher set up for you? Because the teacher has a reason for this. Maybe there are, state content standards or something that the teacher means to hit in this presentation, particular things the kid's working on. And, so just always going back to, well, what's the teacher saying? And that also shows a lot of respect for the teacher. And when the kid feels that he can't pit the two against each other, then the child ends up with better support from both ends.
I think it's also like a big part of it is the teacher actively listening to a student as well, especially if it's like a authority figure or they're an authority figure and listening to someone that they're meant to teach. Like having that idea of, okay, yes, I'm the teacher, but I'm also interested in students' feedback. So it's not just the relationship between a parent and a teacher, but also the teacher and a student, and sort of building that negotiation kind of
Yeah.
ability.
I love that you brought that up because, yes, I've been talking so much about the parent giving the child a voice, but it's definitely the same thing in education as well. And studies show that the more of a voice the child has, for example, choosing lessons in differentiated learning or giving an explanation of why he or she went about a project a particular way, studies show that the children thrive in those scenarios. Lots of times as a teacher, we're scared to step back. We think, if the kids are talking, disaster is going to happen. But it's actually the opposite. The child's more engaged, feels more respected, feels more a part of what's happening in the classroom, and gets a much better learning experience. But then also on that social emotional end, the same thing when it comes to behavior. When I would have a student misbehave, I would talk to them. I wrote about it in one of my books. I had a child come in and he was, slamming his backpack and, he said something inappropriate to a student. I mean, he was, quite, misbehaving. And I asked him, just step outside for a moment, be with your mom. I got class going. I walked out. And when I walked out, you could tell he thought I was going to be upset, or I was, how could you do that? Or, that sort of thing. And instead it's that questioning, right? It's that listening. And instead, I said, you are such a sweetheart. And I don't understand what's going on in there, because it's not, I start to tear out because it's a tough story. I don't understand what's going on because this is so out of character for you. Like, tell me what's going on. And he had seen his mom's boyfriend beat her up that morning before school. And as a teacher, if we're not listening and we're not asking, we can't follow up in the appropriate way that's going to best support that child. And we never know what they're dealing with at home. And it is so important to let the child have a voice academically, and let that child have a voice when it comes to everything else too, because that voice is so important.
No, it's definitely a tough subject, allowing that ability. And thank you so much for sharing that story, because I think it's such a great example as to what we were just talking about as well, sort of looking into, you need to look into the child's life, because a lot what's happening at home affects them in so many different ways. And if you're just sort of assuming that they're a bad kid, you're never going to really know what's going on. And it definitely leads you to follow up on what's going on at home and build up from there, because that's definitely had an impact. So no, thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yeah. I have a little sculpture on my shelves over there that student made me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
No,
it's funny. I have this one here from another student. This one, because I always, those labels you're talking about, what you assuming that's a bad student, or that, that sort of thing. Those labels are so powerful. And I'd always treated my students, that I just love them so much, and they're just the best thing in the world. And that one right there, I just love that. He's now an adult, but I remember finding out, because he was such a joy to have in class. And I remember finding out from the other teachers that he was a terror on campus. They talked about how misbehaved he was in class, all this. And are you kidding me? He's just precious, But you set those labels, and they really live up to it. Whether you're a parent or an educator, you give a kid a label, and he or she will live up to it, whatever that label is.
No, exactly. And I think those conversations are so important. And I think that relationship between, I love the relationship I had with my 7th grade teacher, and I still remember her. I still check in on her every now and then, because she had such an impact compared to the 5th grade teacher who always told me that I was never going to be more than what I was, and never going to be more than a C student, never going to be more than average. And then coming into a 7th grade class just before high school, the amount of uplifting sort of communication, because my style of learning was definitely, I memorized songs very quickly. So when it came to a lot of subjects, she would find songs that would fit, because a lot of us sort of had that ability, or had the need to look at things differently. And that was such an impactful moment, because I realized, okay, there is actually people who do want to see you succeed. It's not just my parents standing up for me, but it's actually also teachers who are also wanting. And then that was the first class that I realized that I actually really wanted to learn something, really wanted to do something from. And it was an amazing realization.
Oh, that's beautiful. Makes me tear up.
No, I tear up when I hear it, when I talk about it as well. Yeah. I think it's such a big thing.
Yeah. And that's the power. I mean, just the parents hold so much power on the course that their children will take. And it's the same thing with educators. We can all make that difference, no matter which end we're on.
Exactly. Now, I want to thank you so much, Jenny, for coming on to the show. And I want to end off with the open mic section, which sort of gets you to talk about something that you are passionate about or something that you want to promote as well. So in the last minute, I'd love for you to share what's on your mind.
Oh, sure. Well, I will say, I mean, write a lot of books, but they've always been for educators, researchers, were not mainstream. And I'm so excited to do my first mainstream book. I've been working on it for a while now. It's a little bit tied to this one's not mainstream. This one's for researchers, increasing the impact of your research. But a lot of the stuff from here is going to be in it, and it's going to be called, working title, Data and Goliaths, and it's going to be about data wielding underdogs, how they got their information accepted. You know, when they had data, whether it was dry data or data on something people didn't want to accept because maybe it came from a group they're not in, or, you know, whatever the reasons, how to get around those cognitive biases and whatnot and get information shared based on not just how people learn, but based too on how we can get around those biases and, so that findings can have greater impact.
Well, that's interesting. It's based a lot for parents and talking a lot to parents as well.
For anybody. Yep. For anybody. Okay. Yeah. If you're talking to a child about this is why, this is, a better course of action, whatever it is. And so I'm really excited about it. But I've always, for years, I was pushing out a book or two a year, just boom, boom, boom. And on this one, I've been spending quite a bit of time on it. It's taking me longer. So it might be years before it comes out, but I'm really excited about it. So that's the topic I'm obsessed with the most these days.
No, I love that. And I love you take a lot of the principles that you've learned from research and you learned and sort of made it not a how-to manual, but also the conversation, sort of build on the conversation and make it more parent-friendly, make it more for the everyday person. And I think this is what the show is about as well, is bringing that together from all of the scientific principles that you've studied and that we're talking about and sort of built it into everyday conversation. So no, thank you so much for sharing that. And I honestly can't wait to see it.
Thank you. And in the meantime, I've been just putting some pieces. I have my online column for Psychology Today, and it's entirely education focused. So parents and educators are the main readers of that. And so I'll cover little bits every now and then. So they're little teasers. But yeah, maybe a couple of years. I've given myself some license to go slowly on this one.
That's good. Enjoy every moment of it as well. Well, awesome. So along with that, if our listeners want to find out a little bit more about you, is there a place that they're able to go?
Yes. I'm on all the main social media tools. Usually my handle is at Jenny G. Rankin. But if they go to my website, that's really the best way because it also has all my social media links and email and everything else. And it's jennyrankin.com. So JennyRankin.com. And they can find me there. They can find, all my books, speeches. I do a lot of public speaking. So there are links to things like that, TED Talks, so stuff like that. Fun thing.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Jenny, for joining me on the show today. It was amazing talking about this and sort of learning from my personal experience, your personal experience, and building the understanding between both parent and teacher.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was such a joy. I love everything you shared. It was very interesting and inspiring.
Oh, thank you. And I hope you guys learned as much as I did when it comes to the importance of that communication. I'll see you all in the next episode. You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.